The air in Rohan was thick with tension. For weeks, the people of Edoras had felt an unease creeping through the land, a whisper on the wind that seemed to foretell something far greater than any of them could comprehend. The skies, once clear and familiar, had begun to darken. The sun, usually bright and warm over the vast plains, was now hidden behind thickening clouds that churned ominously in the distance. Éomer, leader of the Rohirrim, stood atop the hill overlooking the great plains of Rohan, his hand gripping the reins of his steed. His sharp eyes scanned the horizon, the once calm wind now carrying with it the scent of something far more dangerous. The clouds were growing darker with each passing hour, swirling as though something, or someone, was calling to them from beyond the sky. A loud crack of thunder echoed across the plains, and Éomer's horse reared nervously, sensing the storm. Éomer calmed the animal with a firm hand, but his eyes remained fixed on the sky. This was no ordinary storm. It was something otherworldly, something ancient. He had heard the rumors of strange happenings at the borders of Rohan, tales of wild storms, of flashes of lightning that seemed to come from nowhere, and whispers of a god returning to Middle-earth. He had dismissed them as superstition, but now, with the storm gathering strength in front of him, Éomer felt a chill run down his spine. From far across the plains, the rest of the Rohirrim were assembling in Edoras. The warriors of Rohan, skilled riders and loyal to the core, could feel the rising unease in the air as well. They had seen the clouds in the distance, heard the distant rumbles of thunder, and felt the tension that gripped the land like an iron fist. But no one knew why the storm had come or what it meant. As Éomer turned his gaze back to the hill where his people would soon gather, he noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. A flash of lightning struck the ground, and through the crackling electric light, he saw it. An immense figure descending from the sky, framed by a swirling vortex of clouds and lightning. It was a man, or something that appeared to be a man, clad in shimmering armor, his eyes glowing with power. The figure's presence radiated raw energy, and Éomer's breath caught in his throat. The figure raised a hand, and the storm answered, intensifying with a deafening roar. The god had arrived. The warrior, with a voice that shook the heavens, called out, "I seek a warrior worthy to wield the storm. Who among you dares to face the power of the thunder?" Éomer's heart raced. He had faced many dangers in his life, but nothing like this. The very air crackled with power, and the land beneath his feet seemed to tremble in reverence to the god above. "I am Éomer, son of Éomer, and I lead the Rohirrim," he shouted back. His voice steadied despite the fear stirring within him. The figure in the sky smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. "Then you are the one I seek." The storm intensified, swirling violently as the first drops of rain began to fall. But Éomer was no longer afraid. The winds carried with them the promise of a challenge that would determine the fate of Rohan and the legacy of the Rohirrim. It was the beginning of something far greater than any of them could have imagined. The storm had fully descended upon Rohan, its fury palpable in the air. The sky crackled with violent flashes of lightning, and the wind howled as though it were alive. The once serene plains of Edoras were now a battleground between the forces of nature, and Éomer, heart-pounding, could not shake the feeling that this was a fight unlike any he had ever known. Standing firm at the base of the hill, Éomer's steed pawed at the ground nervously, sensing the danger that loomed overhead. But the Rohirrim leader held his reins tightly, his gaze never wavering from the towering figure above him. The storm god stood in the swirling clouds, his presence commanding the heavens themselves. "I am Thor, god of thunder." The voice boomed like a deep, resonant echo, shaking the earth beneath Éomer's feet. "I have come to test the might of your warriors, to find one worthy of wielding the storm. Who will face me?" Éomer's heart raced. The storm that had arrived in Rohan had a name. Thor, a god whose very presence sent shivers down his spine. The legend spoke of him, of his strength, of his hammer, Mjolnir, that could shatter mountains. But none of those stories had prepared Éomer for the magnitude of the power before him. He looked to his comrades, the Rohirrim warriors, who stood in tense silence behind him. They were trained to fight, to defend their land with every ounce of their being, but they were no match for a god. The wind howled louder, urging Éomer to step forward. With a deep breath, Éomer straightened, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "I am Éomer, son of Eamund, and I will accept your challenge, God of Thunder." His words rang with defiance, the flames of his pride burning bright even in the face of overwhelming power. He would not let fear control him. Thor's eyes flashed with approval. "You have courage, mortal," he said, his voice now like the sound of 1,000 storms clashing together. "But courage alone will not save you. You must prove your strength, your resolve, and your heart. Only then will you earn the right to wield the storm." Without warning, Thor raised Mjolnir, and the sky erupted with a deafening roar of thunder. The clouds above grew darker, and the ground trembled as bolts of lightning struck around them. Éomer's horse reared in panic, but he held firm, calming the animal with steady hands. "You will face me in battle, Éomer," Thor declared, his voice ringing out like the tolling of a war drum. "Defeat me, and the power of the storm will be yours to command. Fail, and your land will suffer as the storm rages on." The challenge was set. Éomer could not back down now. He knew that Rohan depended on him, that the fate of his people rested on his ability to face this god and emerge victorious. With a determined shout, Éomer spurred his horse forward, charging into the heart of the storm. The ground beneath him seemed to shake with each thunderclap, and the air grew thick with electricity, crackling around his body. He could feel the weight of the challenge bearing down on him, but his resolve remained unbroken. Thor, standing high above, swung Mjolnir with a mighty force, sending a bolt of lightning crashing toward Éomer. The warrior raised his sword just in time, the strike of lightning clashing with his blade in a burst of light and sound. The force of the impact sent him flying from his horse, landing hard on the ground. The storm raged around him, but Éomer rose to his feet, his body aching from the force of the blow. He had felt the power of Thor, and it had nearly broken him, but his spirit was unyielding. The challenge had only just begun. Thor's laughter rang through the storm, like the sound of rolling thunder. "You have the heart of a lion, Éomer," he said, "but heart alone will not win this battle." Éomer clenched his fists, determination burning in his chest. He would not fail. For Rohan, for his people, for the honor of the Rohirrim, he would face this challenge head-on, no matter the cost. The storm had reached its peak, and the battlefield was nothing short of a nightmare. The wind howled like the wail of 1,000 lost souls, and lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the chaos around them. Éomer, breathless and battered, stood his ground against the full fury of Thor, the god of thunder. Every fiber of his being screamed in agony, but his resolve never faltered. He had faced countless enemies in his life, but nothing compared to the overwhelming power of the storm that raged around him. The weight of Mjolnir, Thor's mighty hammer, fell like a thunderclap each time it struck the ground, sending shockwaves through the earth. The force of the blows reverberated in Éomer's chest, rattling his bones and shaking his will. Thor stood high above, a towering figure of divine strength, his glowing eyes locking with Éomer's. "You are strong, mortal," Thor's voice thundered, his tone both respectful and mocking. "But strength alone cannot win this battle. Only those who have the courage to strike with the full fury of the storm can hope to defeat me." Éomer's sword was heavy in his hand, his arm trembling with exhaustion, but he gripped it tighter. The storm raged around him, his body battered by the relentless forces of nature, but he refused to give in. He would not allow Rohan to fall to this god's wrath. With a roar, Éomer charged once again, his sword raised high. He ran directly toward the storm itself, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. The wind lashed at him, nearly tearing him from his path, but he pressed forward, the fire of defiance burning in his eyes. He had fought for his people before. Now he fought for his very soul. Thor raised Mjolnir above his head, and with a deafening crack, he hurled it toward Éomer. The hammer flew like a bolt of lightning, hurtling toward the warrior with unstoppable force. Time seemed to slow as Éomer saw it coming, the air thick with the crackling energy of the storm. His heart raced, and he knew he had but a moment to act. Summoning every ounce of strength left in his weary body, Éomer threw himself to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. But the power of Thor's hammer was not so easily escaped. The ground exploded in a blinding flash of light as Mjolnir struck the earth beside him, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The force of the strike knocked Éomer off his feet, and he crashed to the ground, struggling to rise. His vision blurred, and the storm above him seemed to swirl in chaos. But through it all, Éomer felt something shift within him, a spark of understanding, a connection to the power Thor wielded so effortlessly. It was not strength alone that could defeat the god. It was the will to fight, the courage to stand in the face of overwhelming odds and refuse to yield. Éomer clenched his teeth and slowly, painfully, rose to his feet. His legs wobbled, but he stood tall, his gaze never leaving the god above him. Thor's laugh rang through the storm, echoing like the roar of the heavens themselves. "You are tenacious, mortal, but the storm has only just begun." But Éomer's eyes burned with newfound resolve. He was no longer fighting merely to survive. He was fighting for something greater, for Rohan, for his people, for the legacy of the Rohirrim. He would not allow fear to defeat him. With a renewed roar, Éomer surged forward once more, his sword raised high, the storm crackling around him in answer. He would face Thor's power, not with brute strength, but with the heart of a true warrior, the heart of Rohan. Thor's eyes glinted with something akin to respect. "You have courage," he said, his voice softer now, but still thunderous. "Perhaps you are more than just a mortal." And with that, the storm surged again as the battle raged on. The storm's fury reached its crescendo, an unrelenting chaos that shook the very heavens and earth. Éomer's body ached from the brutal clash with Thor, the god of thunder. His sword was battered, his armor dented, and his breath ragged. Yet through it all he stood tall. The winds whipped around him, and the lightning cracked the sky with deafening force. But in the heart of the storm, Éomer found a strange stillness. The air grew thick with anticipation, the very atmosphere pregnant with the energy of the clash. It was as though the storm had reached its peak, and in that moment, time itself seemed to pause. The earth was quiet for the first time since Thor's arrival, the winds dying down to a mere whisper, and the thunder muted to a low rumble. Éomer stood in the eye of the storm, his gaze locked with the towering figure of Thor, who stood above him with Mjolnir in hand. The god's presence still radiated with divine power. But there was something different now. The god's laughter had ceased, and his piercing eyes seemed to assess Éomer in a new light. "You have proven your strength, mortal," Thor said, his voice softer than before, yet still thunderous. "But strength alone does not define a warrior. What do you fight for, Éomer of Rohan? Is it the glory of battle? Or is there something deeper, something that lies within your heart?" Éomer's breath slowed, his pulse still hammering in his chest. The storm had tested him in ways he could never have imagined. But now, in the center of it, he felt something stir within him, something far more important than mere physical power. "I fight for my people," he said, his voice steady despite the thunder that rumbled around him. "I fight for Rohan, for the land that has given me everything, for the warriors who ride by my side. I fight for the legacy of my ancestors and for the future of my kin." Thor's eyes flickered, and the hammer in his hand glowed faintly. The storm around them had not fully subsided, but in the eye of it, a profound silence filled the air. It was as though the storm itself listened, waiting for the truth of Éomer's heart to resonate with the power of the divine. "You speak with conviction, mortal," Thor said, his voice almost reverent. "But conviction is not enough. A warrior must be willing to sacrifice everything for what they hold dear." Éomer's grip tightened around his sword. He had already sacrificed much for Rohan, his life, his honor, his future. But he understood now that Thor's challenge was not just about strength or even bravery. It was about the willingness to give up everything in the name of what truly mattered. "I will not yield," Éomer declared, his voice ringing through the stillness. "For Rohan, I would give all that I have. If the storm is what it takes to protect my people, then I will face it head on." Thor nodded slowly, his gaze piercing and filled with an ancient wisdom. "You have the heart of a true warrior, Éomer, and it is this heart, this unwavering resolve, that shall carry you through the storm." As he spoke, the sky above them seemed to shift. The dark clouds parted, revealing a patch of clear blue sky. The sun's rays broke through the storm, casting a golden light on the battlefield below. The winds softened and the thunder ceased. For the briefest of moments, the storm seemed to stand still, its raw power held in check. "You have proven yourself worthy," Thor said, his voice resonating with finality. "You are not just a warrior of Rohan. You are a warrior of the storm." With a mighty gesture, Thor raised Mjolnir, and the storm's fury began to fade, though the energy in the air remained electric. A soft rumble of thunder echoed across the land, but it was no longer the destructive force it had once been. The god of thunder had seen Éomer's heart and had deemed him worthy. The god's figure began to fade, and with one final glance, Thor's voice echoed in the wind. "May your courage guide you, Éomer, son of Éamund. The storm is yours to wield." And with that, the storm passed. The wind died, the thunder fell silent, and the skies above Rohan cleared. The battle was over, but for Éomer, the war had only just begun. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered in the air like the fading sound of thunder. Rohan, once shrouded in tempestuous darkness, now basked under the first rays of sunlight in what felt like an eternity. The winds had calmed, and the sky, free of the oppressive clouds, now stretched wide and clear over the plains. The earth, too, seemed to breathe again, its power renewed by the storm's fury. Éomer stood at the heart of the battlefield, his body weary, his armor marked with the scars of battle. But in his eyes burned a fire stronger than ever before. The god of thunder, Thor, had tested him, pushed him to the limits of his strength, his courage, and his heart. And in the end, Éomer had proven himself worthy. The storm that had threatened to consume Rohan had not only spared the land, it had left behind something greater, a warrior reborn. As the final rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, Éomer's steed, a mighty chestnut horse, trotted toward him. The creature was as battle-worn as its rider, but it stood strong, its eyes filled with trust and loyalty. Éomer mounted the horse with ease, his movements fluid and sure. He felt different now, as though the power of the storm had merged with his own spirit, binding him to something far greater than himself. With the weight of Thor's challenge behind him, Éomer turned his gaze toward the horizon. His people, the Rohirrim, had gathered, watching with awe and reverence. They had seen the storm, heard the rumblings of thunder, and witnessed their leader's courage. The tale of his battle with the god of thunder would be passed down through generations. But for Éomer, it was not the glory of battle that mattered most. It was the future of Rohan, the protection of his people, and the honor of the